his piece, Entering into Joy, Augustine of Hippo invites us to imagine all the tumult of the body to quiet down, along with all our busy thoughts, earth, sea, and air. If the very world should stop, and the mind cease thinking about itself, go beyond itself, and be quite still. I'll confess that Augustine is not one of my favorite figures in the development of Western Christianity. I think he took the tradition down a theological path that did more harm than good. So it's just as well I didn't know that side of Augustine when I first encountered this passage. I was open to his words about entering into joy, and they vibrated in me with the purity of truth, much like those Sufi poems. As the passage goes on, Augustine calls for us to tune out all the sights and sounds of the world around us so that we might sense the ultimate reality. Not, in his words, through the tongues of men, nor the voice of angels, nor the clouds, thunder, nor any symbol, but the very self, which in these things we love, and go beyond ourselves to attain a flash of that eternal wisdom which abides above all things. Well, who wouldn't want to keep reading? I've got to see where this lines up, these flashes of eternal wisdom. He writes, and imagine if that moment were to go on, leaving behind all other sights and sounds, but this one vision which ravishes and absorbs and fixes the beholder in joy, so that the rest of eternal life were like that moment of illumination which leaves us breathless. He concludes, would this not be what is bidden in Scripture? Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Wow. Augustine's words tantalize me with a taste of this transforming joy. But his prayer is a rather lofty starting point into this topic. Let's try on some other possibilities of what it might mean to enter into joy. Here's a story from Reverend, a wise fool who appears in many Sufi tales. One day, Reverend began talking to a man from another town. The man lamented, I am rich, but I am also sad and miserable. I have taken my money and gone traveling in search of joy, but alas, I have yet to find it. As the man continued speaking, Reverend grabbed the man's bag and ran off with it. The man chased him, and Reverend soon ran out of the man's sight. He hid behind a tree and put the bag in the open road for the man to see. When the man caught up, he located the bag, and his facial expression immediately turned from distress to joy. As the man danced in celebration of finding his bag, Reverend thought to himself, that's one way to bring joy to a sad man. The story reveals that joy is not something we can buy with wealth or seek out by chasing sensations. Finding joy may simply be a matter of perspective, a matter of appreciating what we have. Maybe joy is like a place in our hearts. Perhaps entering into joy is like inhabiting our bodies, our relationships, our lives in a way that is receptive to the joy hiding there in every crevice. Joy is gazing into the eyes of a baby who gazes back at you. Joy is seeing great turtles surface in the creek and paddle slowly in the sun-gleamed water. Joy is finding your spiritual home, knowing that you belong with this marvelous ragtag group of dreamers and doers who suffer and sing through life together week after week. Joy is cresting a trail where a vista breaks open and your breath catches at the sight of the majestic peaks above, the verdant valleys below. Joy is is being woken from a tyranny of your to-do list by the sound of a child's assenting giggles. When we are surprised by joy, when it comes over us spontaneously, whatever worries and demands were on the tip of our thoughts the moment before fade, only for one glorious, joyful moment. What if joy is waiting to be uncovered in everyday moments, just below the surface of our inner monologues? Teresa of Avila wrote, "Her heart is full of joy with love, for in the Lord her mind is stilled." She points to how we can bring our minds to rest by absorption in something beyond our little ego selves, letting joy and love emerge in the stillness. I know of no better spokesperson for joy than the poets. So here's another poem, this one by a seer of our own age and culture, Mary Oliver. She has a way of getting caught up into natural beauty. She writes, "Every day I see or hear something that more or less fills me with delight, that leaves me like a needle in the haystack of light. It was what I was born for, to look, to listen, to lose myself inside this soft world, to instruct myself over and over in joy and acclamation. Nor am I talking about the exceptional, the fearful, the dreadful, the very extravagant, but of the ordinary, the common, the very dread, the daily presentations. Oh, good scholar, I say to myself, how can you help but grow wise with such teachings as these? The untremblable light of the world, the oceans shine, prayers that are made out of brass. It is what we were born for," Oliver tells us, to instruct ourselves over and over in joy in such simple sights as shining water and waving grass. Alas, sometimes we are so accustomed to our usual way of going through life, bearing chronic pains of body, mind, and spirit, anxious about completing all the things, grieving what we have lost, easily triggered and entranced by the many stimuli in our environment, that we do not notice the joy that may be available in that moment. We may be missing out on joyful moments that are right there, depriving ourselves of release from the weight of our life into the freedom of being lost in beauty, startled by humor, mesmerized with wonder. Sometimes we hold so tightly to our mental constructs about the world, the explanations we've created about how things are and why, that we are closed off to fresh experience, to the raw sensations and feelings and intuitions of the present. We may move too quickly to interpreting our experience rather than just being in it. One of my colleagues relays the story of another Unitarian Universalist minister, Bill Clark, who went to the beach after a long, hard day. At the time, Bill's daily life, for month after month, had involved accompanying people who were dying almost daily of AIDS. As you can imagine, Bill was depleted, physically and emotionally. He had grieved so many lives lost too soon. He wondered how he could possibly find the strength to go on. In this state of mind and heart, as he stood on what he had thought was an empty beach, Bill heard a woman shouting. At first he wondered if she was in trouble, but it soon became clear this was not the case. Rather, what she was shouting over and over again was, "Joy! Joy!" All of a sudden, something shifted in Bill's heart, almost a revelation. It was possible to choose joy, even in the midst of tragedy. It was possible to be so committed to joy, so overwhelmed by joy, that you would need to shout it to the very wind and waves. Touched as he was by this stranger's declaration of joy, Bill decided to join in. "Joy," he called to the woman. "Joy," he called to the seagulls. "Joy," he cried to the sand and the sea and the invisible horizon. "Joy!" And each time he called out, he felt his heart lifting. Each time he called out, he felt more connection with this stranger, and through her to the whole world of people trying to find their own joy. And then a damp and sandy golden retriever came running from behind a sand dune and dashed up to the woman. "Joy, there you are," she said. "Time to go home." And with that, the woman leashed up her dog, Joy, and headed off. Bill may have misinterpreted what he was witnessing, but you have to appreciate how he made the most of what joy it was possible to find there on that beach. To enter into joy, we must be in the moment, receptive to the gifts of the present, like Bill was. Going out into nature to soothe his soul turned out to be a good strategy for Bill, even though it was a domestic creature, not a wild one, that brought him surprising joy. Not all efforts to find relief are as successful. Sometimes the very thing we do to escape pain, gorging on favorite foods, binging on entertainment, plunging ourselves into our work or our latest hobby to avoid difficult relationships. Sometimes these have the unintended but inevitable consequence of cutting us off from joy, too. That's the catch. To be present to the joy in our life, we must be present to the pain as well. When we can allow ourselves to feel it without pushing our pain away, all the good things that are real and be fully encountered too. Joy, wonder, connection to the interdependent web of all life, of which we are a part. The opposite is also true. It does us no more good to cling to moments of pleasure or joy than to run from pain. William Blake spoke to this with the famous lines, "He who binds to himself a joy doth the winged life destroy. But he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise." When we are present to both joy and sorrow in our life, when we can kiss the joy as it flies, trying to hold on to it, then we can fully experience what life offers us. Easier said than done, though, right? Sometimes we are blocked from joy because of painful parts of our present that we are resisting experiencing, or that just need a break from experiencing. Or because of the defenses we have put up to keep ourselves from repeating in the future the painful experiences of the past. There's no fault or shame in this. It's something that is natural for all of us to do. It takes work and support from others to be able to bear with pain and loosen defenses that may be not only protecting us from risk of further pain, but blocking out joy too. Sometimes the only road back to joy goes first through suffering. Educator and writer Parker Palmer tells us of his descent into clinical depression at an earlier point in his life. Depression, Palmer writes, is the ultimate state of disconnection, not just between people, but between one's mind and one's feelings. During this period, Parker had some well-meaning friends who would drop by and try to coax him into doing things that they thought would make him feel better, like getting out into the beauty of nature. It didn't help him. Palmer might objectively recognize that it was a beautiful day, but he couldn't force genuine experience of joy. To be reminded of that disconnection, he wrote, only deepened my despair. Palmer needed the support of caring friends who didn't try to fix him. For brief periods, he needed medication to help stabilize his condition. And he needed time to allow himself to come through his depression, which he eventually did. So I don't mean to suggest that we can each go through life experiencing nothing but joy if we just try hard enough. It's kind of almost an oxymoron, isn't it? Try hard enough to turn joy. We may need to allow ourselves to experience the depression, the grief, the regret, or whatever it is that has us feeling down before joy becomes accessible to us again. It reminds me of the children's story, Going on a Bear Hunt. You may have heard the story where a family sets off in search of a bear, declaring, "We're not scared." They encounter one challenge after another on this adventure. Tall grass, a cold river, oozy mud, a dark forest, a swirling snowstorm, and finally, a gloomy cave. Each time, the family comes to the same conclusion. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we've got to go through it. It's how it often is with the cold rivers and dark forests in our lives. There's no way over it, but through it. And yet, the human spirit is resilient. We can bear a lot. And joy may be part of what carries us through those times. In her essay, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Alice Walker describes her mother's hard life as an African-American woman raising a large family in the 1920s and 30s. She labored in the fields with her husband, sewed the children's clothes and family's quilts, canned and preserved their food, and Walker describes how her mother, in between all these tasks, as well as battling their bigoted white landlord, also undertook a labor of love that fed her soul. My mother adorned with flowers whatever shabby house we were forced to live in, Walker writes. And not just your typical straggly country stand of zinnias either. She planted ambitious gardens with over 50 different varieties of plants that bloom profusely from early March until late November. Whatever she planted grew as if by magic, and her fame as a grower of flowers spread over 3 counties. Because of her creativity with her flowers, Walker writes of her mother, even my memories of poverty are seen through a screen of blooms. Sunflowers, petunias, roses, dahlias, forsythia, spirea, delphiniums, verbena. A garden so brilliant with colors, so original in its design, so magnificent with life and creativity, that to this day, people drive by our house in Georgia, perfect strangers and imperfect strangers, and ask to stand or walk among my mother's art. I picture Walker's mother in her garden, absorbed in the beauty of the flowers and the wonder of growing things, and I see a person who knew just how and where she could enter into joy. Joy can go hand in hand with organized resistance, too. It can be not just a refuge from injustice, but a source of strength to fight for what we know is right. The infectious Black spiritual we just sang, When the Spirit Says Do, was sung during the Civil Rights era at nearly every demonstration, mass meeting of activists, and march in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Such music helped give people the strength and sense of self to keep going as activists. Amid struggle and persecution, they found joy and courage by singing together wholeheartedly. So whatever the gifts and challenges in our lives today, we too can let joy well up from our souls, from the goodness and strength in us when we sing together. Walker noticed one other thing about her mother and her gardens. It is only when my mother is working in her flowers, she writes, that she is radiant, almost to the point of being invisible, except as creator, hand and eye. She is involved in work her soul must have. That quality of absorption into something beyond ourselves, to the point that we are relieved of thoughts about ourselves and the burden of our worries and fears, brings joy to many artists, scientists, and others who forget themselves as they follow their muse or hunt answers to gripping questions. Many of the poets and mystics also point to this state of absorption or emptying out of self as a key to attaining joy. Attaining it perhaps not just in fleeting moments, but becoming permanently established in joy. Teresa of Avila, the one who described finding joy when her mind was stilled, continued her prayer thus: "She lives not for herself, but lives to serve the Lord of love in all, and swims across the sea of life, breasting its rough waves joyfully." Like Blake, who in his poem Eternity hisses the joy as it flies, Teresa is not attached to anything. She's absorbed in something greater than herself, absorbed in serving others, which allows her to navigate even the rough waves in the ocean of life with joy. St. Augustine, the one with whom I have a theological bone to pick, also knows the great relief and promise of stillness. He wrote about the joy available in forgetting oneself and entering another state of consciousness, as he wrote about in entering into joy. In fact, if you read enough of the mystics of any tradition, East or West, the refrain becomes familiar by softening all the outward senses and letting thoughts, ideas, expectations melt like snow in bright sun. We may find revealed the fresh, clean presence of the eternal and the infinite, the undercurrent of that creative force that some people call God, the ultimate source of joy, undulating through our lives in a never-ending tide. Whether we find it in turtles or flowers, in poems or prayers, in infants or the infinite, joy, I believe, is our birthright. As sentient beings on this blue-green marble of earth, spinning in the vastness of space, can enter into a state of joy seems itself to me a miracle. So why shouldn't we? We all deserve to know joy. Let us trust enough in the goodness of life and in our own worthiness that we may allow ourselves to experience all the joy that life offers. Let us enter into joy. So may it be. Please stand in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 100. I've got peace like a river.